Hello and welcome to another. No, just kidding. So what we're going to do for this example is we're going to actually start looking at branching. So we just covered Boolean expressions. So we're going to look at one type of branch statement, which is an if statement. So you guys have all said you've done if statements before, right? So an if statement typically consists of what? An if with some expression in it. Well, maybe we should actually create some stuff that we can put in our expressions first. So let's create it. Let's create something called test equals true. And let's create an int x equal to 4 and an int y equal to 76. That sounds okay to me for now. We can also create another bool, which is going to be false if we want it. Doesn't matter. So what we're going to basically do is let's do the structure first. There's going to be an if followed by an expression followed by some body. And then what else happens after that? Is that enough for an if statement? Yeah, so that's okay. So let's put in, so we could do something really simple like if x is less than y. We can display out a message that says x is less than y. I'll let it out the coughing. Okay, so what's happening here? We've seen this is similar to the Boolean expression. We're just saying, okay, x in this case is 4, y is 76. So we're going to see out if x is less than y. So if we actually go and run this here, how do we run it? I noticed a couple people came to me after and said they had problems with running for the first time. And one of the issues I think was people weren't changing to the directory first that their code is in. So if you're saving your program in that CSCI 1060U folder we created in your home folder on Linux, then what you need to do is, the first thing you need to do is you need to use CD to change the directory into CSCI 1060U to switch it over into that directory. Okay? So, assuming you're in that directory in the command line, how do I compile this? G++, and we type the name, branching example 1, right? I just make sure I've saved it. So if this compiles correctly, we don't get any warnings. Where does it save the file again? The executable? But what's the name of the file it saves it to? Right, so it goes ./a.out, and it says x is less than y. Okay, that's great. Now, the other thing that we can actually do is if statements have an optional else as well. So an else, we could put out something like x is greater than or equal to y, right? And if we had something like, if y was 3 instead now, what should the output of this be? Please, shout at once. You guys are still typing. Is that what's going on? Okay. If I go too fast, just tell me. I'm happy to slow down. So in this case here, x is 4, y is 3. So if we get to this if expression, this is going to evaluate here. X less than y means 4 is less than 3. Is that true? No. 4 is not less than 3. So because this is false, it executes the else branch instead of the if branch. So in this case, what we should expect is we should expect this program to print out x is greater than or equal to y. Okay? So that's an if statement. The else is completely optional. The other thing you can also do in an if statement is you can also create what's called a multi-way if statement. And that's where you have something like, what? You do what's called an else if x, we could do this for example. Else if x is greater than y, instead we can say here, cout x is greater than y. And then for the else now we'll just say x is equal to y. Does everyone understand why we're changing the last message? Yeah, we're changing the last message here now because if x is less than y, this first if will catch it. If x is greater than y, the second one will catch it. Otherwise, they'll be equal. Yes?
Do you like to address the form of like we have to start
So you're talking about code style. At this point, let's say it's personal preference, but we'll be doing a future lecture on good code style practices, and I'll talk to you about some of the style practices that are used by different organizations and so on, and we can talk about what's good and what's not. Both of them are acceptable. Okay, so if we run this now, what is it going to print out? What did I forget? Oh yeah, good point. So this is a semicolon error, so I forgot a semicolon. I'm glad you guys are on top of this. Thanks. So, assuming it's programmed correctly, what should the output be? Now it says x is greater than y because instead of going down into the else branch, this is, first it says, hey, this is false, jumps to the next one and says, this one's true, so we'll do this one. If this one was also false, it would go down here. So that's an if statement, and that shows you if statements with optional else, and they can also be multi-way. The other thing you can do with if statements is, in the body of an if statement, you can also nest if statements. So we could put something like if test, right? Okay? We could just put a statement like this in there. Now, we could also do, what? We could put a not here as well to see if test is false, right? But in order to do that, as Rajan, as Rajan said, we have to have, typically the whole expression for the if statement, the syntax is the expression is in brackets. So that's there. So now if we change this back to, it was 76, I think it was before, what we should get is, if the first if gets evaluated to true, then when it's executing this body, it can then also evaluate the internal if statement as well. So let's just give that a try. And, oops, did I forget to compile? Oh no. What happened? Test was true, right? So we could, let's try it with test 2 instead, since test 2 is false. What will happen now? Test 2 is 0, it says. Yeah.
Previously, you know how you just put test and it didn't execute, right? Since test is defined, like its value never changes above, do you think the compiler wouldn't have even compiled that in?
That's a question. So the question here is, because the test 2 has the value, or test has the value of set of true and doesn't get changed, the question was, will the compiler be smart enough to optimize and just basically replace this with true because it doesn't actually get done? Again, it depends on the compiler. We can look at the code and see what it does. There are a number of optimizations that get done. Whether that's one of them, to be honest, I'm not sure. But that's the kind of thing that some pre-compilation can actually take care of. If it's something where it's an evaluation that isn't dependent on values that are given at runtime. So, okay, and that shows you how to do an if statement. Any questions?